Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Cocktails and Politics conversation between David Hogg and Jason Kander. My name is Mary Sanchez. I'm on the board of the American Public Square, and possibly a familiar face to some of you through my work in local media. I'd like to begin by thanking our season sponsors, as well as our individual and corporate members. Your support keeps APS free and open to the whole community. I also want to thank Jay Rieger for being such a great friend to American Public Square, and mostly for putting the cocktails in politics. If you've never been to an APS event, welcome. What we want you to know is that we have a certain way of doing things to keep the conversation fact-based and respectful. We use something called a civility toolkit. In short, please don't clap or shout during the program. If you like something that you hear that's being said on stage, just nod. And if you don't, give a shake of your head. You'll be able to ask questions using the question cards. And if you need another card, to submit, just raise your hand, and our volunteers will come to you and hand you one. Okay, with that, it is my honor to introduce our friend and APS National Advisory Board member, Jason Kander. Many of you, oh, go ahead. It's okay to clap now. Obviously, many of you know
You
and
people did
admire
not listen
him.
to the rules at all.
That's just a start. But obviously, many of you do know him. But if you don't, we would like to read just all about you a little bit here. Jason is an Afghanistan veteran, former Missouri Secretary of State, and a guy who kind of ran for president for half a minute. He's senior advisor at Veterans Community Project, the co-host of the Majority 54 podcast, a best-selling author, the founder of American Rescue Project, and a men's amateur baseball player. He's a fitting moderator to lead this conversation, a leader in talking about things that often go undiscussed, from the mental health of veterans to being an advocate for helping those who served alongside our military in Afghanistan. And I think that's fitting because just as David Hogg has been a tireless advocate against gun violence and for younger representation in democratic politics. Jason?
Thanks, Mary. Thank you, Mary. Now I get to introduce David. This is David. I have more to say than that. David Hogg is a co-founder of March for Our Lives and the first, yeah, you can, sure. I will suspend the rules.
We're about to have a Jeb Bush moment where it's like, please clap.
Yeah, please. Yes. When
We
you
are
instructed,
bipartisan here,
yes.
apparently. So
There you go, perfect. And that like happened before you were born, so that's, well, like, no, I mean, he's a historian. That's awesome. I'm still getting over the fact that he is so much younger than me, and you could tell, it's like the first thing came out of my mouth.
doesn't look like it.
What did you say?
I said it doesn't look like it.
Oh, man, you are good. He is so good. All right, I'm starting again. David Hogg is a co-founder of March for Our Lives and the first Gen Z member and former DNC vice chair. After surviving the 2018 Parkland shooting, David and his classmates sparked one of the largest youth-led movements in the world, leading to the passage of hundreds of gun safety laws nationwide. David later founded, yeah, sure.
You are all failing terribly.
Yeah. It's great. David later found his footing in legislative campaigns by helping elect Maxwell Frost, the first Gen Z member of Congress. He and Frost's campaign manager, Kevin Latta, co-founded Leaders We Deserve, a PAC and super PAC dedicated to electing bold, young leaders to office, raising $11 million in its first cycle to lay a Democratic bench of Maxwell Frost. From mobilizing tens of thousands of people and creating mass movements to working closely with local and state leaders and helping elect Democrats up and down the ballot, time and again, David has driven change and strengthened the Democratic Party from the ground up. Please clap. Okay, so probably, David, most of the people in this room became familiar with you at the same moment that I became familiar with you, which is probably the way most people you meet right now became familiar with you, which is when you were on television in the middle of the tragedy in Parkland. What I'm curious about right now, just to start with, is, well, let me continue this obnoxious preface, which is to say, you are clearly a really talented person and a really driven person, and I bet you were those things before that. And now you're in this effort and creating this movement, and I'm curious who you thought you were going to be before that day versus now.
Great question. So I think I appreciate you saying that I'm talented. I would say more than anything that I had incredible parents and teachers and friends and family that the only reason why I'm on this stage right now is because I had teachers like my third grade teacher, who I can't even name because I'd be worried that she would get doxxed. But we'll call her, Miss April, who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I had a mom who believed in me when it was hard for me to learn how to read because of my dyslexia. And I had people around me who, at every turn, even when I didn't even think I was going to college in the first place, still believed in me. And I think about how many other people don't have the privilege of having that because they don't have the resources that they need to be able to invest in their young people the same way that I was invested in. So yes, I'm slightly talented, but I was very well resourced more than anything. And to answer your question and not sidestep it because I'm not a politician, who I wanted to be was I wanted to be my dad. My dad was the best person I have ever known in my life, full stop. He was a FBI agent. He was a Navy helicopter pilot as well, one of several Navy pilots in my family. And despite being an FBI agent, you would think that would make him very hard and cold. And it was the opposite. And that's why he was such a good agent, because he was such a kind, loving human being, to the point that the best example of this that I can think of, and this is going to sound probably dumb, but it is really important, and I think emblematic of who he was as a father. He passed around this time last year. When I was younger, I was obsessed with skateboarding, and I really wanted this skateboard that was a longboard. I got it for Christmas. It was amazing. Eventually, I ended up putting in a precarious spot, and it rolled down the street and got, unfortunately, killed by a car. And I get a call at middle school, when I'm in middle school, it was like a month after I got the skateboard, and I'm distraught, because this is like at this point, I would have traded my sister for this skateboard, right? And when I come back home that day, my dad actually called in sick to work. And he went to the factory in Venice, California, to try to get a new board. And they said, we don't sell that type of board anymore. So what he did is he actually came back home, and he reshaped the skateboard and made it a slightly less longboard that I still have to this day. And that's just exactly the man that he was, in helping people every single step of the way. And I think about how much he hated politicians because he saw them as corrupt as hell and not fighting for people like my family was. My mom's a teacher, my dad was an FBI agent. And I really wanted to be like that when I grew up, somebody who just really helped people and took down corrupt people. And the other thing that I didn't know that I wanted to be this at the time, but I was really on a track where I wanted to effectively be Mike Wallace. That was the other thing. I wanted to scare the crap out of powerful people, nonstop. That started out with my high school principal and Spanish textbooks, but then it scaled on to other things.
Great, okay. That was a great answer, thanks.
It might have been a weird story.
No,
but
not at all.
That's it.
It was a great answer. So as I mentioned to you earlier when we were upstairs, it's interesting for me to now be asked to occasionally do things like talk to this person to find out what the young people are thinking. Because I got out of politics 7 or 8 years ago, and my entire time in politics, I was told I was the young person. And now this is the oldest I've ever been. And so as a result, now I'm in the unique position of both being asked to sort of help investigate what does the next generation care about and how do they feel, but also getting to a point where I'm 44 now, I'm actually becoming pretty curious. Now I'm becoming pretty aware, oh, we are not of the same generation. And I mention this as a preface to say, I entered politics from a perspective where my generation was brought into it by Obama. The context for our entry into politics was Obama's campaign, and it shaped the millennial generation's view of what politics is supposed to be. And so as a result, we tend to compare everything to that. And you are coming into it as, you're the young person who's supposed to speak for this generation. You have an entire organization, which we'll get into in a moment, that's around this, but it's from a very different perspective. And I think it's helpful to frame this for you to talk about, because we talked about this a little upstairs, but I think they would benefit from hearing your perspective on that, from your generational perspective.
Well, good thing you got cocktails. I think one of the most important things to start out with is how we define Gen Z. And basically, if you do not remember 9/11, you are Gen Z or you're Gen Alpha. If you remember 9/11, you're probably a millennial or older. And in my perspective, having studied history in college a lot, I think one of the defining characteristics of our generation is that we've never really seen our country truly united in a moment of crisis. Right? Right. We think back to I think back to George Bush at Yankee Stadium, right? And people going crazy, right? And there has never been any type of moment where it has come close to our country actually feeling united at all in our generation's memory. And in fact, the opposite has happened. Whether it was the financial crisis, whether it was even the time period after Obama was elected, he tried so hard to be bipartisan and got screwed over repeatedly because of it. And then it was COVID, and obviously the opposite happened, right? At every turn, we have never seen people come together to actually be united in a crisis in this country. We've only seen leaders that we really feel like divide us constantly over and over and over again. And so I think for you and the millennials, it's a politics of some semblance of hope. For us, it's a politics of failure, and instead of addressing that failure, being divided over what to do, and it actually getting only worse. Where our entire lives, we've done, statistically speaking, basically everything we've been told, right? You go to school and you're told, don't get people pregnant, don't do drugs, right? We have some of the lowest rates of teen pregnancy, some of the lowest rates of alcoholism, some of the lowest rates of drug use, and some of the highest rates of education. And despite doing all of that, and despite actually making more money than our parents did, everything is so much more expensive now that effectively it is less. And in spite of doing everything we've been told growing up, we find ourselves in this position and increasingly I think for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, asking themselves, why do they believe in the future of this country? When what they've been told by their politicians, at the bare minimum, with school shootings, that the best that they can do to protect us is send their thoughts and prayers. For decades. What our generation is looking for is we know nobody is coming to save us. We have to save us. We need to be the politicians that we had a few of, but far too few of. And we have to address the system that stopped those politicians from getting there in the first place and elect people who represent us and not the special interests that are destroying our generation and brought us here.
So you talked about hope as part of that, but it's interesting because, so for the millennial generation, hope is like the outer shell. It is the context. It was the Obama campaign. Everything, I think when millennials campaign, they campaign really sort of promising a return to something. And for you, that period it's literally history. Like, I mean, for you, you're 25, right? So everything that you were just talking about the things that came before and were part of the millennial generation, they are mostly things, you lived through them, but they're mostly things that for your generation were told to you, or were accounts that you were given. And so what hope is pretty much the mother's milk of politics and organizing. How do you manifest hope for that generation in order to engage them?
Oh, I thank you for asking this question.
That's what I'm here for.
So important. So I think what's really interesting is that for the Obama era, right? My favorite speech of this century so far is Obama's 2004 DNC speech. Classic. Highly recommend. And the sense of hope that he gave people came obviously from him and his incredible skills of storytelling and speech giving and everything like that. But I think our generation acknowledges that even if there wasn't another Obama-like figure, they're not going to save us, right? And for us, it's a matter of finding that hope within ourselves and it not being delusional, right? Because it feels like it can be at times. I feel like it can be at times.
Condescending or patronizing.
Or condescending, or just like completely out of touch, where it's like, are you seriously saying that we need to be hopeful in the face of like a fascist? Yeah. Right? And I think for us, hope may not even be the right word, but it's what I think back to is after Parkland, people would look at us, and when I look at the photos of us now, I'm like, oh wow, I get why people were hopeful by what we were doing, because when you're 17 years old, you don't see yourself as a child. You see yourself basically like an adult who can't vote yet, right? And for us, it wasn't like, oh, we're making ourselves so hopeful. It was, we are so goddamn angry over what happened here that either you are going to change the damn gun laws or we are going to change who is in government. And it's about fighting so ferociously and ruthlessly hard that you actually have no other goddamn choice but to hope, because there is no other option. Because if you don't believe that change is possible, it never can happen in the first place. And that is, I think, the distinction. We know Obama is not going to save us. We know there is no single person who's coming to save us, and we have to do that. And the place that we find that hope from is ourselves in these movements. When we walk out of our schools by the millions, when we march in the streets by the millions, and register people to vote and actually do turn out and vote, that's where we find our hope, in ourselves and the results that we get. Because we know it's not going to be any single one person, because we've tried that before. And that is what I think the difference is we have to find a realistic sense of hope by getting so much righteous indignation and passion and fury productively turned into the democratic process that we force change to happen, even in a state like Florida, where everybody says it's terrible what happened to you young people in Parkland, but you don't understand. This is Florida. Nothing changes here, and you shouldn't even bother trying. While simultaneously saying, thank God you kids are here to save us, because my generation really, really screwed things up, right? And because we had the audacity and frankly the stupidity to believe that change was possible, we actually did make it in Florida. We raised the age to buy a gun to 21 in a Republican trifecta state, and we passed a red flag law that has been used over 20,000 times to save lives, thousands of them across the state. And that's the power of young people, is that they're dumb enough to believe that change is actually possible. And oftentimes, that is the reason why change doesn't happen. And it was really brought home to me, as my final point on this, by an older person named Dolores Huerta. When I was at a protest with her, I asked her, what is the most important thing that any young person or anybody that wants to make change, because if anybody knows it, it's her. That's alive, right? What is it that they need to know? What is it that you would tell them? What she said to me is, it's not a matter of whether or not people say change is possible. It is a matter of whether or not you can make people actually believe it is possible in the first place. And that's what I think in the Democratic Party we have failed to do. We've become the party over the past decade of what we can't do, the politics of the can't, the politics of the incremental, instead of the politics of the possible that actually brings us to our strongest points in American history. Like, imagine if JFK in 1960 at the DNC goes out there, and instead of giving his remarkable New Frontier speech, highly recommend that one as well, he says, you know what, we just can't do it. That moon, is too far away. Those Soviets, they're too powerful, and I think we just got to, let's talk about the tiny incremental things that we can do. I think our country is at its best when we repeatedly challenge ourselves constantly to work better, because the beauty of being an American, of being, for now, a constitutional republic like we are, is that we know the best is yet to come. That's why they're called amendments. That's why our founders set it up in a way where they knew things were not perfect, but they knew that the answers could be found in future generations. And that's why we're doing this work at Leaders We Deserve right now, because we know that hopelessness, the belief that we cannot make change and it's not even worth trying, that is the greatest threat to our country and its democracy, because that is the thing that empowers men like Donald Trump.
We're going to bring up the roving reporter here, Georgia Kerrigan. While she comes up, I will say, it's interesting, when I listen to you talk, I'm reminded of somebody who I heard recently say that they keep being told that they're supposed to be optimistic or have hope. And they actually find that in these times, those words are rather useless, but the only word that actually seems to matter is courage. Like, you can have hope, you can be optimistic, but it won't do anything. And I think what you're talking about is hope for this generation comes from seeing people who have some courage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the reason why I ran for vice chair of the DNC is because I wasn't afraid to lose, because I wanted to tell people what they needed to hear, I thought they needed to hear, not just what they wanted to hear. And then I coincidentally ended up winning.
Georgia, go ahead.
Thanks, Jason. My name's Georgia. I'm happy to be your roving reporter for tonight. I'm a student at Northwestern University, and right now I'm KCUR's up-to-date intern. And thank you for being here, David. Let's start with—
Please clap.
I'm going to start off. Many of us see a gap in civic engagement. Younger Americans are underrepresented at events like this. What specific steps would you recommend to young people who are engaged to get others to speak up, show up, and vote?
Well, first of all, I would give you the same answer that I tried to give the Democratic Party, which is, I think in our party, frankly, I can't speak for everybody, but I think broadly speaking, we don't actually want to win back young people. We want to win young sycophants that meet us where we already are and have them come to us and tell them, you don't understand, young person, you're actually wrong. Let me tell you why we are good for you. Instead of asking, why did you leave us? And what can we do to earn your trust and support back in the first place? And I think the way that you can get those young people more engaged is give them somebody who does listen to them, like Zoran in New York City. And in our party, like that, so let me paint you a picture of a hypothetical, not so hypothetical situation. Let's say that there's a candidate who runs in a primary and ends up getting 6 months after one of the most devastating losses in modern American history, in part because of young voters not turning out nearly enough for us. There is a candidate who in a primary gets 3 times the 18 to 24-year-old turnout in his city than the Democratic nominee for President of the United States did 6 months prior in the general election. What would you do? Would you say, wow, maybe we should pay attention to what kind of messaging, what kind of tactics were used in that race, or should we destroy him? Many have chosen to destroy him. Not the DNC, to be clear, because they have actually come out and said he is our Democratic nominee, which I'm very glad to see. But many people in the establishment have refused to support him, even though they're the same ones that say, vote blue no matter who, at the end of the day. Because this big tent, I got news for you. It's got a left side and a right side. And you can't just support one side of the tent, because that's how it collapses.
All right. I'm going to go to our second one. What do you think young activists misunderstand most about party politics? And what do seasoned politicians misunderstand most about young activists?
I think young activists think it is a lot harder at times than it actually is. And they also, well, that's not necessarily true. It is very hard. But sometimes I think they don't understand how there are ways that they can, because there's a lot of people that don't even know that the vice chair of the DNC is a thing, right? And if I didn't know it was a thing, I wouldn't have been able to run for it in the first place, right? I would have been like, well, and educating yourself on what the actual power structures are and how you can get involved in them. A lot of the time, if you show up at your local Democratic Party events as a young person, they're like, oh my God, thank God, a young person. And they care. They want to listen to you. They want to help. But a lot of the time, the young person just doesn't even know what's happening in the first place. And what you're going to have to do, I'm going to let you in on a little secret that I learned from LBJ in Robert Caro's book that is very helpful. Ask people for advice, even if you don't necessarily think that they're right. Because what happens for young people, and I'll get to the older people too, but for the young people, what I've noticed is really interesting. If you become very successful when you were young, and there are middle-aged people or older people around, a lot of the time they will get very insecure. And they'll start thinking the reason why that person is succeeding is because they're corrupt, because they have nefarious intent, because they're in it for themselves, because of this other thing, because of this thing or this other bad thing. And they make up all these reasons instead of being able to accept the uncomfortable truth that sometimes that young person is just better at their job than you were at their age. But, and this is what LBJ did when he was in Congress as a 28-year-old, he basically got everybody to see him as their grandson, where he asked all these people for advice constantly, so that, think about it this way, if you're an insecure person and somebody asks for your advice, you're like, yeah, that's right, because I'm great, right? And then when they start succeeding, it's like, well, they succeeded because of my advice. And I want to defend that person. When somebody comes out and says, I think they're a bad person for X, Y, or Z reasons, like, hey, that person who I also identify as part of my success and I care about because they care about me and they humbled themselves before me, I'm going to defend them because I think you're wrong. That is one of the easiest things to do that I don't think anywhere near enough young people do. And it doesn't mean that all that advice is going to be right. It oftentimes will contradict each other. But sometimes there is good advice there. And simply asking people for that is one of the most underutilized things I think that people can do. For the older people, our institutions have to change or they will die. And I think what happens is there's a pattern where institutions are created by radical ideas that end up taking over a landscape like, the Democratic Party, for example, right? It hasn't always existed, but there were a couple people with a radical idea to do something that created it. And then as those people mature, as they become older and they become the incumbents, they don't want things to change because they want to stay in that position. And what I've noticed in our party is this really crazy problem at every level, whether it's at the federal level, the state level, or the local level, is we would oftentimes rather do the thing that is individually beneficial to keep ourselves in the same positions of power as they are right now, even if we were in the super minority, as I've seen in Florida, then the thing that could actually be collectively beneficial and break a supermajority, but could potentially mean that you may not be in your exact same position of power anymore if you're in the state legislature, for example. I have a very specific example in case you can't tell that I'm thinking about. And we have to ask ourselves, are we in this for ourselves so that we can keep our meaningless titles and with no power, or are we here to potentially lose that title but actually do and accomplish what we're all here to do at the end of the day?
And then one final one that zooms out a little bit on the whole party. What is one issue you think Democrats underplay or overlook that could actually resonate deeply with swing voters?
I think there's a lot of politically unmotivated people that are uninvolved people that are extremely upset about what is happening right now in Gaza. And the party has really failed to talk about it in any substantial way, shape, or form, in my opinion. And I know that I will get all kinds of crap for saying this. It is horrifying. There is no excuse for starving people, period.
You may clap.
At all.
I'm enjoying this power. No, I didn't mean to stop that train of thought. I think it's an important one. I'm going to take it and parlay it into, feel free to expand on that, but I think that's an important place to talk about the generational disconnect on issues like that, and on issues, any issue where it seems like there's an entire generation of politicians who thinks it is okay to not acknowledge certain realities. Like when you talk about the race in New York City, when I listen to establishment politicians, including some from New York, talk about that race, they will say, Democrats, they will say things like, look, it is completely unrealistic to X, expansion of free housing, expansion of free this, expansion of free that. Or on the issue of Gaza, they'll say, well, look, this person is running for mayor of New York. And then what I keep hearing you say in interviews is that what you're looking for, and I'm going to parlay this into you talking about your organization here in a minute, but that what you're looking for are people who are authentically listening. And what is implied in that is that means responding to what they're hearing. And so what I hear you saying is that candidates who are talking about these big ideas are not necessarily further left on that the youngest generation doesn't view them as further left on the spectrum. The youngest generation views them as paying attention to the shit that's happening. Is that fair? I don't know what my question is. I'm just like, take that, go.
Yeah. Well, what I'll say is, I think too often the number of conversations that I hear in DC all the time that are so completely out of touch with what actual normal people and voters are thinking about is crazy. I'll tell you, in DC, most of the things that are asked, and I'm telling you this because I see it all the damn time, there's typically 3 questions that are asked when you're talking about a congressional race. What is crypto doing? What is APAC doing? What did they raise last quarter, and how much cash do they have on hand? What voter cares about those things? What I want to know. I guarantee you, if you ask the American people specifically about those 3 issues, is that going to determine who you vote for? It's probably less than 5% of the American people, right? And it creates this massive disconnect where these politicians are so focused on special interest groups and these things that the average American is not thinking about that much, and completely losing the fact that right now, if we want to talk about young voters, we got to talk about the fact that we are in a massive youth unemployment epidemic that AI has spurred on. Nobody seems to be talking about it nearly enough or basically at all in Congress right now. Maybe it's because there's only one member of Congress under 30, but I don't know. But my sister just graduated college and she is in a foreign country right now because she could not get a job, working a different job in that country. And she's not alone in that. She has a friend that's applied since they graduated from their college that has applied for, I think, over 500. I want to say it was even 1,000 jobs or something insane like that, and still have not been hired. And this is a problem across the board, and we're not talking about it. We're not talking about the fact there's so many issues that people are actually dealing with, like the fact that housing is way too damn expensive. You can clap for that. But
I'm sorry, AP. I've blown out the rules
But-
on this.
but-
I'll
but-
fix them next time.
But what happens in DC is that they get these politicians, the consultants, the groups get caught up in this group think where it's like constantly this self-fulfilling prophecy of what are these groups going to do that basically only people in DC even know the names of.
Can I tell you a quick story about that? That just
In a second.
okay. It's your show.
But like that is what they're focused on, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like if you say young people do not vote and you don't invest in young people because they do not vote, they will not vote. But if you actually go out and do something that Democrats need to do a hell of a lot more of, which is saying, hi, what do you actually need? And humbling ourselves and saying, we know that you're suffering, but what I'm not going to do is say, hey, you know, I've never been to Missouri before. Actually, I have been here. But I'm going to tell you all what you need in this state right now. And you're going to like it. Not going to go well, right? What Zoran did that we need to learn from that campaign that I feel like people are losing, and I'll stop in a second.
I'm interviewing you.
What?
You keep going.
Well, I want to hear what you think too. What people lose about Zoran is it is not to say, I think people get this misconception that it's like, oh, if somebody runs with that exact same policy platform in rural Wisconsin, that it's going to win. No, obviously, every one of these communities is different. What we need to learn from it is it's not enough just to post on social media, as some of these idiot consultants love to say, like, oh, just get on social media. If Andrew Cuomo was posting on TikTok twice as much as Zoran, I'll tell you what the difference would have been in that campaign. He would have lost by even more. And what young people want is somebody who actually believes in something. They want somebody who asks them, what can I do for you? Because that is what the Democratic Party is actually meant to do. We are Democrats. I can't say we because we're bipartisan here. I'm a Democrat because I look, there you go. Some people still remember what JFK said when he asked, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for it. That's why we're Democrats, because we actually believe that government can work for the people, and we don't run on the idea that government sucks, get elected, do an awful job, and then run on the idea that government sucks because we did an awful job. We actually try to make it work, and it's hard. It is damn hard. But guess what? We're here for the fight, because it's the thing that created Social Security. It's the thing that ensured that when my dad got an early death sentence, it didn't mean a financial death sentence to my family because we had Social Security to rely on, as millions of others of Americans rely on. That we had Medicare and Medicaid, right? And all of those things that we created, because that is the power of good government. That's why I'm a Democrat. And what scares me is we get caught up so much in this politics that we can't, and just the politics of cynicism and saying, oh, they're never going to win, they're never going to win, they're never going to win, all the time, that it stops us from dreaming big and actually accomplishing what we need to address the real issues that the American people are going through, and is the reason why they left us. Because as they are drowning, we're saying, well, actually, this is what the parliamentary procedure in the Senate says about raising the $15 minimum wage. Fuck the parliamentary procedure. Sorry. We need change, we need it now. What were you going to say?
My story's not as good at that. We're going to skip it. But I'm going to ask you to talk about your organization, but I'm going to lay down...
That's a good idea, yeah.
That's fine. But I'm going to lay down context for everybody first, that they already have in their mind, which is, you and I were talking right before we came up here, and I asked you, because I still get asked this question a lot, so I asked you, do you want me to ask you, like, how do you feel about me asking you whether you're going to run for something? And to your credit, you were like, ask if you want. People are wondering it anyway, right? So I say all that to say, I have had the opportunity to know a lot of current, former, and I guess future politicians, and I've known a lot of them who have organizations around them. And so the natural first inclination, and I didn't know you before this, and so the natural question in my mind going into us getting to hang out upstairs and everything was, okay, is this a stalking horse, or is this a thing that, yeah, this person genuinely believes in, but is also sort of a, let's create an infrastructure and then we'll run from it. And I say that in all transparency as somebody who created an organization that I thought was pretty good, but also, had offices in Iowa and New Hampshire. So I ain't better than this, all right? But after spending some time with you, I'm convinced that you're just genuinely pissed off and you don't care very much about that. So this is my way of saying, answer that general question, but also talk about the organization that you're starting.
Absolutely. So, when I was 18 years old after the shooting, I said I wanted to run for office, or I wanted to run for Congress when I was 25. And then I went to college and I studied history. And I realized if I ran for office myself, because for me what it's about is what the hell can we do to just end gun violence and address the broken political finance system that enabled the NRA in the first place and enables all of these other special interests, by the way. And when I thought about that, and I was studying history, and I looked at a couple of things. I looked at the end of the Soviet Union, where you had, stop me if this sounds familiar, a bunch of old people that stayed in power as long as possible and literally died one after another, after another, after another, after another. Not a great way to run a country. When I saw that, and I saw how old Congress was, just demographically speaking, with the boomer population that got in there and has stayed there forever, I saw an incoming huge power vacuum. And then I looked at the most effective presidents that I could think of in American history. I looked at FDR, I looked at Joe Biden, I looked at LBJ. FDR, when he was first elected in New York, was 29 years old. LBJ was 28 when he was first elected to Congress. Joe Biden, I know this is hard to believe if you're a young person, was 29 when he was first elected to the Senate. And I think the reason why they became as effective as they were was because they started when they were young. Turns out, when you get elected when you're young and you're there for several decades, you know how to get stuff done, right? You guys know it. There's a boomer over there that knows it. Sorry, no offense. Maybe you're younger. So that is a critical component of building a better government, is people who actually know how to govern as a president and don't have to govern as a king like our current president does, because they have the relationships and they know how to work through checks and balances and get things done while working through the democratic process. And then I also thought about, what is the greatest asset that I have on my side, that my generation has on our side? That is our comparative advantage, that nobody can buy more of: time. We are going to outlive a lot of the people that are currently against us, and there will be people in our generation that also try to stop this. I see some of them right now. But I thought to myself, you know what's a lot better than me running for office and being just one vote in Congress at best, even if I was to get elected, and getting everything that I work on blocked by the filibuster, and then raising Republicans 3 times as much money off of them fear-mongering about me existing than I ever could raise for my own leadership PAC or whatever it is to fight asymmetrical warfare here. And also ensure that because of all the death threats that I've gotten, and the very real threats to my own safety, that I know that if something does happen, they're going to have to come after a hell of a lot more people than just me, because we're bringing the movement into office. Because we went out there and we looked at, if you look at the first 4 years of Trump's presidency, he was such a bad president, for every year of that presidency, there was a new chapter of a social movement that was born. The women's movement, March for Our Lives, the environmental movement, the Green New Deal, Black Lives Matter. Millions of young people participated in that, like Maxwell, who had been organizing against gun violence since he was 15 years old. And they have the grit, they have the will, they have the determination, but they don't have the resources and the right advice to win and maintain their values, so that we don't just elect younger versions of the old people that are there right now, some of whom are great, by the way, to be clear. There's lots of shitty young people, too. That's why we're very selective. and bring that generation into office so that we can combat that hopelessness that our generation feels and show them it's not just one person that's going to save us. We know that's not the case. But for my generation to see in at least one person in power in their state legislature, in Congress, in mayor, in New York City, somebody who they say, you know what, I can do this because they did it. They look like me. If they can do it, who am I not to try? Because there's no way that one person is going to make the change that we need at the scale that we need. So how about we build what is effectively, you can imagine us like, our model's like Emily's List, but for young Democrats running for state legislature and
Tell them
Congress.
the name of the organization.
It's called Leaders We Deserve. Thank you. It's called Leaders We Deserve, and our candidates, to help inspire that to help combat that hopelessness, I'll give you a great story of why we do this exactly. So there was a young woman running in Texas named Molly Cook. Molly was running for state senate against a Democrat in this blue seat. So this seat was going to be Democratic basically no matter what. And she was running against a Democrat who in the House in Texas had voted not only to arm teachers, but voted to give teachers $25,000 for being armed. As a Democrat, he did that. And he was the favorite of the establishment to get elected to this Senate seat. And Molly was 35 years old, or 32 years old. We called her our geriatric candidate last cycle.
I mean, she sounds pretty old.
Yeah.
And we
actually did have to have a conversation with Kevin where I was like, man, I don't know. She's 32 and our age limit's 30. And then what got us was like, she'll be the youngest person in her chamber if she's elected. So, okay, fine. We'll make an exception.
Still, man, I don't know.
And what we did in that race is we did a poll in the race to see if there was a pathway to victory. We polled the race. She was behind by 5%. But when we informed voters of her background, and she was an ER nurse and her community organizing against like a freeway expansion and other things like that, and that her opponent had voted to arm teachers, she was ahead by 2%. So we saw a possible pathway. So we came in and we spent $300,000 supporting her in that race. And I went out and knocked doors with her in the soup that is the Texas heat in Houston. And I go and knock on what's supposed to be this 60-year-old woman's door named Lisa. Classic Democratic primary voter. But who opens up the door is a 20-year-old guy named Kai, who's shirtless and has gaming headphones on. And he says to me, "Sup?" And I say, "Hey, have you heard about this candidate? She's running for state legislature, all this stuff. She's an abortion rights advocate, supports gun safety, yada, yada." He's like, "That's great." But the first two, I kid you not, this is literally what he said to me. The first two things he said to me was, is AIPAC funding her campaign? And what corporations are funding her campaign? Smart 20-year-old.
For a state legislative seat.
For a state legislative seat. And I got to say, well, this is a state leg seat, so AIPAC is not going to get involved here. And on the corporate money front, she doesn't take corporate money. He's like, well, who's funding her campaign then? And I said, I am. Leaders We Deserve is. Because we're funded by 215,000 individual donors, so that when we support a candidate like Zoran and a bigger donor calls me and says, I'm not going to give you this six-figure check because I don't agree that somebody who got 3 times the number of young people to vote for him than the literal last Democratic nominee did is not somebody I agree with, I can say, look, that's fine. Like, you have your opinions. We're not here to just make donors happy. We're here to elect candidates that young people support, and that looks different in different areas. And when I told him that how our model worked, when I told Kai how our model works and everything, I got to see his face shift from one of suspicion and distrust to one of excitement and hope, where he's like, what? She's not taking corporate money? And I was like, no, she's not. And I said, if you take your gaming headphones off and you give me your phone number, you will get a call from Molly in the next 30 minutes to answer any questions you have. And he's like, okay, cool. Can I even vote in this election? I said, well, if you're registered as a Democrat, then yeah. He said, oh, I am. My mom made me do it, I think it was. And I I said, well, great, then you can. So it comes down to election night. And of course, Kevin was like, dude, we're going to win this race. Sorry, that's a terrible impression of him. But he was like, we got this. And he called out a documentary crew to film this election. Terrible idea, by the way. God. Because you could lose, right? Like these races are not easy. And he was so confident. I was not. And the first results come in, like with 30% of precincts reporting, out of 18,000 votes that we needed for her to win, she's down by about 1,000. He's like, dude, I'm a dumbass. This is a terrible idea. As the documentary crew is filming us, of course. And then more results come in. She's down by 1,500. Then more results come in. She's down by like 2,000. We literally shut down the bar for the watch party that we're at, and we all go home thinking she's lost. And right before I go to bed, I refresh the election results page, and it says Molly Cook, with 100% of precincts reporting, has won by 62 votes in this election. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, David, why does that matter? It's a blue seat. It was going to be a Democrat anyway. Well, let me tell you this. It's not a Democrat who voted to arm teachers, for one. And second of all, I got a call from a member of Congress who said, just 2 weeks ago, who said, I am so thankful that you helped to support Molly because she is, I cannot name who this member of Congress was, and you'll understand why in a second. And he said, she is fighting harder than basically any of these state senators are right now, who've been there for 30 or 40 years, oftentimes. Thank you for supporting her. And she helped to lead the walkout against redistricting. That's why what we do matters. And if she didn't get that support, it's very likely she wouldn't have won.
Yeah, 62 votes, $300,000. I think that's a fair statement.
So that's why we exist. We work with them on a day-to-day basis to do everything we can to get them across the finish line. And not all of our candidates are winners. We don't take on easy fights, but we fight for people we believe are worth fighting for. And we do it over and over and over again because we know that all it takes, as my final metaphor for why we do this, all it takes is 2 or 3 people, because I think right now, Gen Z, my metaphor for us is like, it's like we're a million candles that are not lit in a cave. And we're looking around and we know that we exist, but we can't see the other people around us. But all it takes is one of them being lit to see like, oh, actually there's more of us. And then it can go and light the other ones. And what we hope to do is by finding the best of our generation, that we can inspire a generation of young people to just brute force this shit and figure out how to build a better government by throwing as many young people at it as possible.
Go ahead, sure. How great would it be if I was like, please welcome Kai.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the safe seat strategy some more because...
We work in competitive seats too.
Well, great,
Yeah.
but I want to talk about the safe seat thing for a minute because I think that there are plenty of people who I cannot see. Are you trying to signal me? Okay, I'm going to ask this question and then Georgia should come up. When people think about national politics right now, what they think about is winning and losing seats, right? More people know the math of Congress than we should have to, right? But that's the times we live in. I remember when I was in the state legislature, I represented a safe Democratic seat, but that afforded me the opportunity to actually work my ass off at leading in other parts of the state rather than having to worry. I attended to my district, but rather than having to become a telemarketer and worry about getting reelected all the time. And I just think, so talk for a minute about the difference that a member of a legislative body from a safe seat can actually make versus a member from a competitive seat. Or maybe I just said it, I don't know. But
Well, I mean, the ones in the competitive seats, they're on the front line. Like their job, as you said, is effectively to become a telemarketer, which by the way, should not be how it is, period. Like no matter if it's a competitive seat, no matter if it's a blue seat, it should not, the job of a politician should not be to be a telemarketer.
doesn't that go in the category, by the way, of shit that like my generation took for granted? It was like, well, that's how politics works. And another generation come along and go, what?
Right. Like, part of the reason why I also decided as well, like, that I would never want to be in Congress is I don't want to spend half my damn life in the office of the D-Trip calling people, asking them for money, and not doing my job.
I've called everybody in this room for money. It's terrible.
And at least I'm doing it for other candidates. I can't imagine doing it for myself.
Me. It was terrible for me. It was terrible for them. Like, nobody enjoyed it. You know?
Nobody likes
Thank
this.
you for all the money, though.
The only people that really like it are the special interests that need that to hold
and the
their
consultants.
power. Right,
Yeah.
and the consultants that make stupid amounts of money off of it. And when you're in these safer seats like Maxwell is, it enables you to actually represent Democrats in your state authentically in what they actually want, instead of being like, well, we're gonna do some kind of like half measure and try to just basically piss off as few people as possible. Classic Democrats. And you know who doesn't ask that? Republicans. But moving on. That is a lot of the big difference. And we do support people that are running in competitive races as well. There was a candidate that we supported in North Carolina that we spent $100,000 supporting who broke the supermajority in North Carolina. It's awesome. And now, because the Democratic governor there, who fingers crossed could be a senator soon, those vetoes actually matter in that state. And I think the thing that our party really needs more than anything at this point is competition. The number, when we went out there and said that we were going to challenge people running in, not in just any seat, but running in safe Democratic seats that basically have zero chance of becoming Republican, the
Which,
level.
for context, is why you're not a vice chair at the DNC right now, for people who don't know.
Hotly debated topic, but I agree.
Well, I mean, I say that to your credit, not as like...
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll get into that in a second. But the point that I was getting at is that our party has we have a system where if you enter Congress the way that somebody like AOC does, you are relentlessly punished, and they do everything in their power to destroy you. And the only reason she hasn't is because it is a testament to her powerfulness and her leadership, and the fact that there's so many people that believe in her that it is undeniable, even for those people that wanted to stop her. She didn't just go after any Democrat. She went after basically the person that was likely going to be the next Speaker of the House and slit their throat, politically speaking. In an incredibly brave act of political courage that far, far, far too many people in our party do not have at all. And I think if we want to build a better Democratic Party, it's going to be getting people to vote for us, not based off of the amount of harm that we are not doing. It's saying, look, they suck so much, at least we're not them. It's saying, actually, this is what we are doing for you, and in our blue states as well, we are ruthlessly competitive to ensure that we have the best representation possible for you, so that we build the best government possible for you, because we know that is a major part of the answer to combating Donald Trump, is building a government that actually works for the people and not special interests. But part of what that's going to mean is also holding ourselves accountable in the Democratic Party, because we are far from perfect too, and saying, actually, no, we are going to reject things like corporate PAC money, because we know that that matters. Anyways.
Georgia, you
we
have
can.
more?
It feels so weird not to hear you guys clap. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It is, right? They're just...
Because I can't see your nods.
They are being civil so hard right now. They're just civiling so hard. Go ahead.
David, you started to answer this, but along those same lines, people are still wondering, how do we show respect to elder, experienced statespeople?
Show respect to the ones who deserve it. That's what I would say. And what I mean by that is, for example, Lloyd Doggett, amazing member of Congress. He's a progressive member of Congress in Texas that is 78 years old, last I checked. And he led the fight. He helped to lead the fight against the Iraq War. He has a 100% pro-choice voting record. He's a really great progressive member of Congress. Unfortunately, if this redistricting stuff goes through in Texas, Lloyd is going to be forced to run against Greg Casar. most likely. And it sounds like he's going to do it. And I don't think that he should. And I think it's possible for us both to have respect for people like that have incredible track records, but also acknowledge it's time to give somebody like Greg Casar, who's a 36-year-old union organizer, one of the youngest members of Congress, and the head of the Progressive Caucus, a real chance to lead and not say, well, I need to be in this seat for the next 2 years, and step aside and let somebody like Greg run. So I think part of it, too, is like also asking for their advice, but it is challenging, too, because you don't want to replicate the same system that they built, because there are flaws in it, some intentional, some not, many not, and it's a delicate balance, but I think a lot of it is engaging with them as a real thought partner and genuinely being curious about what do they think about your suggestions on how to answer a pressing problem, and having them frankly grill you on why you're wrong. Have them be your devil's advocate. Have them try to destroy you rhetorically and really press you on all the reasons what you're not thinking about as to why you're wrong. And don't be afraid of that. Embrace it. Because that uncomfortability, that is what we need more of. Because we need real change in this party, especially in a moment of crisis like we're in right now. And I can tell you this much from being involved in activism on an issue as uncontroversial as gun control. If we, after Parkland, did what many politicians would like us to do and be like, please, our classmates are dying, do something. They would have taken a photo with us, sent it to their email list, raised money off of it, and done absolutely nothing at all. And if we didn't press Democrats to be better on guns too, we would not have passed the first federal gun law in 30 years. Let's keep in mind, we had chances under the Obama administration to do things on guns. We did not. We did not. And people are dead because of it. It doesn't mean that we're as bad as Republicans, but it means that we need to take a long, hard look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what are we doing in this moment? What is that issue that is like guns in 2008 right now? That we're going to be looking at ourselves with future generations where they were like, what were you doing? So that we don't do that. So asking those questions and having them grill you and using that to your advantage and having them be critics to you is what I would say.
Well, do you take into account not only how much money a person in Congress raises from special interests, but how much money they bring back to the community when you're deciding and advocating for who to get rid of?
Well, so that's more difficult because sometimes if you're in an urban area with a bigger population, it's going to be easier to get, major pieces of infrastructure funded, most likely. It's going to be easier to get other things. So there's a bit of nuance that comes with that. The main thing that we really look at is not just age, it's also, are you corrupt as hell? Right? Did you, there is I'm not saying that, let's say in a hypothetical situation that there was a candidate who embezzled millions of dollars from their state government and is a current sitting member of Congress. That person should not be in Congress, period. So that's really what we're looking at, but that's a great point that you bring up.
And then this last one, as a former teacher, it's clear that we have a civics education crisis. How do we teach and encourage young people to want to vote and be civically engaged? Okay, this is probably a radical take, but I think, because I don't think state governments are going to do this, you got to show young people how they're being screwed over by the system. And what I mean by that is it's talking about the fact that,
Can I amend that question and ask you about the premise of it? Will you accept the premise of this question that there's a civics education crisis because, and I guess the premise of that is young people either don't vote the way we want or they don't vote in the numbers that we want. But does that actually mean there's a civics education crisis?
Well, no, I want to push back on that. I think that young people, and this is going to surprise a lot of you, young people over the past 4 election cycles have actually voted at the highest rates ever for young people in American history, more than any of you older people did. No offense, guys, but that's the truth, right? It's not enough at all, but it is more than basically any generation did before us at a rate consistently higher than they did. And it's not enough at all. But part of it, too, is structural. And I want to tell a different story about one of our candidates when it comes to this, too, that I think is so important. You guys ever see those long lines on college campuses of all those young people voting? Does that make you like happy and you're like, thank God, like those young people, they're engaged. That is voter suppression you're seeing. And I saw it up close and personal in Florida. Last cycle, we had a candidate named Nate Douglas, who was 23 years old, running for state legislature in Florida in a competitive seat critical to breaking the supermajority. His district encompassed the University of Central Florida. 60,000 students or so go there. Guess how many voting booths they had? 6. 6. I was on the ground in that district on campus. For early voting, the line to vote every day was between 2 to 3.5 hours long every day on campus. And I went to other areas of the district with older populations, and you'll never believe how long the line was to wait to vote. 5 minutes at most. Despite being outspent 2-1, 70,000 people or so voted in this election total. Nate ended up losing that election after hundreds of people told us that they could not vote because they didn't have time to wait in that long line outside in Florida.
Yeah.
Nate lost by 485 votes. And guess who controls the who appointed the supervisor of elections in the county that oversaw that precinct? Ron DeSantis. Exactly. And that is a huge problem that we don't talk nearly enough about. It's not just a civics problem. It is a structural problem. Young people move a lot, and we need to make it as easy as possible for them to register to vote. And frankly, I think if there's cities should have systems where if somebody does sign up, if they're known to move into an area or a state government knows that somebody has moved into an area, you should be sent a voter registration. And frankly, you probably shouldn't even need to register to vote, because I'm damn well near sure that the government has enough information on who the hell you are if you're paying taxes to register you to vote. If they have enough information to send us to war and draft us, I think it's safe to say they can figure out how to register us to vote automatically as well. And it is remarkable. It is an active choice in this country with technology as advanced as NVIDIA and Apple and all of these massive tech companies that we have, all of the money that we have, how sophisticated our government is. It is a choice to not have that be the case in every single state. It is an active choice that we make and that stops a lot of younger people from voting. And frankly, they should also have their ballots mailed to them automatically.
When I was Secretary of State, I went to Korea as you know, the Secretary of State does all foreign relations. When I was Secretary of State in Missouri, I did a trip to Korea, and I sat down with the election commissioner of South Korea. And he told me about their system that any citizen of Korea could walk into a polling place and present their ID, and a ballot would be printed off for them that was the appropriate ballot in the jurisdiction where they lived, no matter where they walked into the place.
God.
And I was knocked over by this, and I was like, how did you do this? And they said, oh, we used our consultant. This is him. And I looked at him, and he was a guy I knew. He was from St. Louis. So yes, we can do that in this country. So I'm going to wrap this up, and in doing that, what I'm going to say is that
let me say one other thing on the civics education point, because this is really important. Our history classes are under attack right now, and it is horrifying. Part of what made me interested in history in the first place, wow, actually I just realized how relevant this is because of the part of the country we're in. I remember the first time that I knew that I wanted to study history, and it was when I was in my AP US history class, and I was reading the primary source documents that were firsthand accounts of the burning down of Black Wall Street. And I sobbed because of how horrifying it was. Our young people need to have those experiences. They need the experience of reading Night, right, about the Holocaust. They need the experience of reading things like Anne Frank. They need the experience of learning about things like the burning down of Black Wall Street and the uncomfortable history for everybody, but especially those in power and the privileged people. Because I think what makes our country great, at least historically up until this point, is the fact that we're not afraid to talk about those things. We're not afraid to talk about, in our history classes, the harm that has happened in our country's past. And I think that actually makes us stronger, not weaker, right? And I think in order for us, on that answer on civics education, I think there are two things that if I had a magic wand and I could really change anything, it would be, there's a lot of things I'd change. But in this regard specifically, I would make it a mandatory requirement that every young person that is in high school takes a speech and debate class, at least 1 year, period. That is how I learned about gun control in the first place. I was so insecure because of my dyslexia, I joined speech and debate thinking that it was gonna be like, when I tried out, I thought it was gonna be like, what's better, apples or oranges? And I wanted to join to roast my classmates more and like have faster comebacks. But then I tried out and they're like, so what do you think the US government's response to Boko Haram should be? And I was like, what? And I was 12. And so speech and debate, I think we need that. We need to create a culture with our young people and future Americans where they are pushed to relentlessly argue on both sides of issues, regardless of whether or not they agree with it, so that they are forced to see different perspectives and understand that shit is complicated. And if you think it's not, you're really an idiot. And then, I think, in my ideal world, every year of high school, you would have, in every single year, a civics class. And it would start out with local government and talk about, like, what does local government do? How does it work? And you would go and talk to your mayor. You'd go and talk to your city council members. You'd go and talk to who the big scary government actually is and understand how it works. How do you create a resolution? What are Robert's Rules of Order? All this stuff. And what are the issues they focus on? Then your sophomore year, you focus on, state legislature. Then your junior year, you focus on the federal government. And then your senior year, it's how do you run for office? It's how does a campaign work? It's how do you build a platform? How do you pass legislation? How do you actually engage with politicians and get them to listen to you? And here is how you can do that. And we're going to make sure that you're registered to vote, because hopefully by that point, they're automatically registered. And with that, as a final point, as a third thing, I really think we need to consider some version of mandatory national service. Not in the form of the military necessarily. I'm not advocating for conscription. What I'm advocating for is I think that Americans at an early stage in their life, immediately after college, need to be trained in a skill set and put around people that they have never met before and come from communities that are nothing like the one that they are from, and get paid well to do it, learn some good skills, and actually talk to people who they never would talk to in the first place, and have a shared experience as a country to help combat the individualism that I think is really harmful to some extent that we have.
100%. So before I wrap this up, thank you for doing this. What I would say, you're going to continue to get the, what are you going to run for question, because, I can tell you from experience that once people view you through that prism, it's hard for them to stop viewing you through that prism. But I can also tell you that as somebody who has held public office and then, tried to actually accomplish change using simply a platform, the second way is far more effective. And it is tragic that you stepped onto that platform in the way you did, at the age that you did. But I think that your opportunity to be effective will be far greater if you stay out of office and continue to do what you're doing. So I appreciate you doing it.
Well, thank you. And there's actually one thing I want to end on, which is a quote that I think a lot more people in DC and in politics need to read. And it came up the other day when I was reading James Baldwin. So hold on 1 second. He said, and this reminds me of a lot of those special interest groups that I talked about, and it's exactly the same story with the NRA, by the way. And this is from his essay, the Fire Next Time. And he says, the subtle and deadly change of heart that might occur in you would be involved with the realization that civilization is not destroyed by wicked people. It is not necessary that people be wicked, but only that they be spineless. So,
thank you.
Don't be spineless. You dropped it.